Congress is facing growing pressure to pass President Biden's social spending bill and infrastructure plan as Democrats and Republicans clash over key components. New CBS polling finds the president's approval rating has balanced out, with 50% approving of how he's handling the job. But when it comes to the ambitious $3.5 trillion spending bill, polling found that Americans are still unaware of what exactly the measure covers, and many have major concerns over the economy, inflation, and spending as Democrats negotiate the legislation. Some of our latest polling also is highlighting concerns over COVID and vaccines as the winter season approaches. So, CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto is joining us now to take a closer look. I feel like we haven't kind of tapped into you in a while, and I am curious about how America is feeling, though I am not surprised that people don't quite understand the president's agenda, because, I mean, lawmakers still haven't figured out how exactly they want to spend all that money. And I presume that what the president is trying to do is sort of win people over with the sort of big issues, the concepts, tackling climate change, support for parents and young children. But the question is the parents' effort, is the president's effort actually resonating when it comes to his Build Back Better spending bill?
It is great to talk to you, Anne-Marie, and I agree. That is the central question. And what we tried to do in the polling was understand the extent to which people are following this, and then what they're seeing as they're watching the Democrats negotiate, like you said, about what's in it. The thing we did that was really striking, Anne-Marie, was we tested the individual parts that they're talking about, whether that's the spending and the amount of spending, and then also some of those policies that you mentioned. And the comparison here that strikes you is that more people have heard about the costs or the potential spending elements and dollar figures than they have about the particular policies that might end up in it. And so you look at this, and $3.5 trillion in spending, there's a majority of people who've heard something about that figure. Tax increases for higher income people, there's a majority who've heard something about that. But then these other elements, the prospect of lowering Medicare drug prices, far fewer who've heard something about that. Medicare coverage for things like dental and vision, far fewer who've heard about that. And that, I think, leads to a bit of a disconnect, because what'll happen is the people who know about these things in the Democrats' plan, they're more likely to support the bill, but not everybody has heard about them. And I'll show you this second slide. These things are popular, and that's probably your good news out of this for Democrats, even if people aren't really aware of everything that they're talking about, is that these things like lowering prescription drugs are popular items. So now the question becomes, can they get that word out? That's a political question going forward, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, that when you talk about the consequences of that knowledge not being there, that not only do they want support, but the Democrats also want to be connected with popular programs, because if it does pass, Republicans might be able to take credit for that. Is that sort of part of the challenge when it comes to this lack of knowledge?
Yeah, and I think as we watch all of this, let me show you a slide that I think is part of what ends up out of that disconnect. Would the bill help or hurt you personally? That's kind of that literal bottom line question for a lot of people. And right now it's just at 36% who think that it would help them or their family, and not a lot more at 41% who say they think the bill will help the economy. So when you talk about the politics of this going forward, well, if people feel like, okay, this is something that's going to help them, then that accrues probably more positively politically. But if they don't get this measure up, that's certainly something to watch as we go forward, right? That's the political implications of this.
Okay, so let's look at this pandemic and how the virus has influenced, the economic recovery. The president and the administration has really been pushing the vaccine. Get vaccinated. If you're eligible for a booster shot, get a booster shot. What do we know about the willingness to get vaccinated at this point?
A couple of big things on that, and really this debate over vaccines is so central to so many things, including the economy. And let's walk through that. First, the news out of last week that there might be on the horizon approval for a coronavirus vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11. So the first thing we did was ask parents, would you get your kids vaccinated? And it is a sizable 37% who immediately say yes, but there's almost as many who immediately say no. And I think this is going to be a big measure to track as sort of the next phase of trying to fight the pandemic. There's these folks in the middle who are maybes, and they are interesting because this is where your public health officials, this is where your information is going to possibly have a large impact. So we'll watch this. And this looks a lot like things did earlier in the year when the vaccines were first rolling out for adults. There were people who were rushing to get it, people who were still on the fence. So that's going to be important to track. And then when you look at the differences between vaccinated parents and unvaccinated parents on this, maybe not entirely unexpected, but it's a majority of vaccinated parents who are the ones who say yes. So that leads, and you asked about this, so I'm getting to your question, Anne-Marie. That leads to, let's understand why it is, I promise I will, that leads to why it is that people say they will or won't get vaccinated. And there's a mix of reasons for this. Some of them are very personal. We've tracked this all along, saying that they're worried about side effects, feeling, even though, yes, millions of people have gotten it, but that the vaccine is still too untested for their liking. But there are others with a more political tinge, and they say they don't trust the government. They say that they're making a statement. Even some of them say, about a quarter say they're making a statement politically about this. Now, those two different things, but one thing we've noticed is that as the ranks of the unvaccinated have shrunk, more and more people get vaccinated, the concentration of those sentiments within the remaining unvaccinated increases. So it's those folks, they are opposed to getting it, and that seems like it is, as from a public health standpoint, partly explaining why those last remaining folks have been very, very hard to persuade.
Yes, because it's not about the science. You can't just give them the facts. They're making a whole other statement with their decision to stay away from the vaccine. So, of course, all of this factors into the economic turnaround, which I think is a really interesting question because there are a lot of kind of moving parts. There is our ability to get, ahead of this pandemic, get people vaccinated, but there are all these supply chain issues. You name the industry, there's a problem. And so the products just aren't on the shelves. And so that has an impact on whether or not people even want to shop if they don't think, they're going to be able to get the fridge that they want for another 7 months. Maybe they just will do without that new fridge. And so my question to you, when it comes to the economy, how people are feeling, what are they willing to do when it comes to the economy and spending, and what could our holidays be looking like here?
Yeah, see, that's so important because sometimes in polling and in other interviews, people can't instantly become economists, right? They don't necessarily watch and see how all of this stuff works, but they do have a sense of how it affects them. And here, it's interesting, you mentioned inflation. People see the reasons for that as a mixture. They're aware of the supply chain issues. They're aware that the pandemic has caused this buildup of demand, but they also blame in part government policy. They want government to do something about it. So I think inflation is going to be one of those key things to watch. And then there's on the demand side, I'll show you a couple of things here. First of all, there's whether or not you're going to, this holiday season, go out and gather with which kinds of people, right? And you're talking about holiday travel, you're talking about whether or not you're going to get together with friends and relatives. There's a quarter, most of them vaccinated themselves, who say they'll only hang out with vaccinated people. So that's kind of step one, and maybe that's a dialogue people are having within their own friends and family set. And then there's the outlook. What do you think is going to happen? This partly depends or influences whether or not you're going to go out and spend that money. They think the virus is going to be, the outbreak is going to be about the same, maybe even worse. Not that many think it's going to be better. So that's optimism. And then finally, let me show you about the vaccinated people, what they're likely to do. And a lot of them, a majority of them, say that they'd be more willing to go out and do those things you mentioned, travel, get on an airplane, go to a restaurant, go to a workplace even, if they know that there are vaccine requirements in place at those places, if everybody there is required to be vaccinated. And that's something we've seen. It's got an economic impact, but it's how people manage and approach dealing with the pandemic and what they want out of it that then in turn affects whether they're going to go out, spend those dollars, maybe stimulate the economy even more, Anne-Marie.
Always so fascinating talking to you, Anthony. Thank you so much.
Thank you.